Okay, well, it's good to see some new faces here and some old faces here, and it's such a blessing to see you guys coming to see the creation model. So welcome to Creation Science 105. It should be 113, but this will make a lot more sense when it comes after the evidence for the flood talk. This one's going to show you a biblical flood model that explains 25 major features on the Earth and in the solar system, and it explains it logically. And then it has 20 astoundingly accurate predictions, and the NASA discoveries are also validating this theory. So this is, I think you're going to really enjoy it, but let's just jump. If you're looking for kids' gifts, I've got them here, the Willie the Woodsman and Chippy and Chetty. You can get these on Amazon. The neat thing is it shares the gospel at the end. And the Willie the Woodsman, it's really neat because the kid has a dinosaur. It's a kid and his pet dinosaur. And it's very clever the way he writes it because it's logical. It's plausible, you know, how he writes it. But again, those are fun. And then another book that if you're looking for a Christmas gift, this is Christian Men of Science, 11 Men Who Changed the World. This is like Johann Kepler, Boyle, Faraday, Maxwell, and Walt Brown. That's who we're here to talk about, his theory, the hydroplate theory. And if you want to hear this book in an audio form, I read it on my YouTube channel. This is, I read it on Zoom. It's 120 minutes long. I should have been cut off at the 40-minute mark, but it didn't cut me off. So you get the whole talk there, and he's just an amazing guy. And so he went to heaven, I believe, on September 27th, just a couple of months ago, or almost 2 months ago. And he was here 88 years. And he had his birth and a dash and then his death. And he made the most out of his dash. You know, the time he was here, I think he's going to be remembered of today's Isaac Newton. He just has so many things. He's connected so many dots. And he got a PhD from MIT, and we'll get into that. And so if you're looking for something to do, and this was happened even before he went on to heaven, we were putting together this week of celebration. The Hydroplate Theory Week of Celebration is going to be December 1st to the 6th at 7 p.m. and you can watch it on YouTube on the Hydroplate channel. And we've interviewed a bunch of people, and I'm so excited to see that. I was like a kid in a candy store learning more about the Hydroplate, learning more about Walt Brown. So that'll be December 1 to 6. And that'll be 7 p.m. Central Time. And I talk to creationists, and they say, well, it doesn't matter how the flood got here. Nobody cares. Oh, they do care. Absolutely, they do care. I got this email. You might have seen it before. There are few things in life that have ever excited me as the topic of hydroplate theory. And it is amazing. It's like having the answers to the exam. Whenever they find something new, discover something new, that the hydroplate seems to validate it. And this one, I got an email. She's been praying for a friend who works at a place. She said, I've been praying that God would send intelligent Christian clients who would talk to him. Brian, you were an answer to prayer. Your conversation with him has opened his mind, and I believe he's been watching your videos a bit because he shared one with me. And with tears in my eyes, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's like, wow, that was pretty touching. And so I emailed her and I thanked her for the kind words. And I said, and by the way, what video did he send you? You know, I got a couple hundred videos from dinosaurs to, you know, the Garden of Eden to, you know, the creation methods and all this stuff. And she said, it was this one. The hydroplate overview is about 20 minutes long. I gave it at the Rotary Club, and it's probably one of the worst sounding videos I have. You know, the audio is not very good, but yet that was the one that he sent because it answers so many questions. These are screenshots from secular journals and articles. And researchers want to know why. Unexpected, fossil oddity, long-standing puzzle. I totally didn't believe it. It shouldn't exist. Scientists puzzled, double-ended mystery, surprising features. Well, why are they so surprised? It's because their perspective of the past is wrong. They got a blind chance perspective of the past. That's like thinking this building got put together by blind chance. That'd be absurd. How much more absurd to think our bodies got put together that way. And yet if that's all they're ever taught, they just memorize. They just memorize and conform. They don't think. And that's why we're here tonight. Otherwise, you know, you got more unanswered questions, hard to believe, world of surprises, major mystery, wrong direction, puzzled scientists, puzzled students. And the hydroplate answers all those. Every single one of them. But we don't have time to go through each and every one of them because it would take an hour and a half. But that's what I had when I spoke down. Somebody flew me down to Houston. a couple of summers ago, and he wanted me to give a hydroplate talk at their hydroplate association, or at their Houston Creation Association. And so I gave it. And by the way, doing God's work, there's tremendous blessings. You know, Pete flew me down there. You know, it was great. He paid for my ticket. I stayed at his place for a week. He lined up a bunch of talks at a Sunday school and youth group and a chapel and at a Bible college. And I gave this talk. And he made steak. An 1.25 inch steak, and he had a pack of it. And it was, oh man! And he smoked them and used hickory. And he's, you know, hospitality is his gift. He just treats you like a king. And that steak was so good because we don't even buy hamburger, you know. And so we have steak. So doing God's work has tremendous blessings. It's really neat how he takes care of his kids. But you can see this talk on my YouTube channel, and it's called the Hydroplate Flood Model: Answers and Accurate Predictions. If you want to see all those things answered. But let's get back to Walt Brown. This guy was a West Point grad, an Army Ranger, a paratrooper. He got his PhD from MIT in mechanical engineering. That's the best engineering school in the country. And that's where he wanted to go. And when he tested to get in, he was in the 99th percentile. And so he's sharp. And he ran the Benet Military Lab, where there's hundreds of people working there, dozens of PhDs, and he's the top dog. And he taught at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and he also was the Chief of Science and Technology Studies at the Air War College. So he's incredibly sharp. And he was driving through Kansas. I used to say South Dakota because that's how I heard it. But then when I read his biography, it's Kansas. He's going through Kansas, and he hears on the radio that they found Noah's Ark on a mountain. And he pulls over and gets the call letters and calls up the radio station eventually and gets the contact information for the people that were on that show. And he got to know the guy, and the guy would stay at Walt's place when he was in the area, and they'd stay up late trying to figure out this flood of Noah. And it's like, well, how in the world can you cover all the mountains with water? And then and he's like, where'd all the water come from? And his friend said, well, maybe outer space. And then Walt says, yeah, but then where did it go? And they just kept on puzzling about it. And he thought, well, if there was and by the way, that's what the Bible says, all of the high hills under the whole heaven were covered, you know, like 15 cubits. And so this isn't a tidal wave going across the earth. This is the earth covered, all the high hills. And so, and that's, you know, that's kind of a shot at the catastrophic plate tectonics model, because that shows tidal waves going over, and that doesn't get all the high hills all at once. Okay, and so then he's thinking, well, if there was an ark on the mountain, that would mean the whole world was covered with water, and that would mean a whole bunch of plants and animals were covered with mud and turned into fossils. And he thought, wait a minute, if fossils are evidence for a flood, what's the evidence for evolution? And he starts to ask his PhD colleagues, and he doesn't get any evidence. And then as he's reading in the Bible, he reads in Psalm 136, to him that stretched out the earth above the waters. Above the water. The earth is above the water, so that means there's water under the earth. And then it says he gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the depth in storehouses. So there's storehouses of water, and it looks like they're under the earth, the same day where all the fountains of the great deep broken up. And hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? And so there's water inside the earth. And so I had given this, this is the 9th edition, but I gave the 8th edition when a few years ago, to a professor at St. Cloud State. Because I said, hey, you don't have a theory for Grand Canyon. You want to see a theory that works? And she said, yeah. And she took the book. And she had it for about 6 months, and we talked about it for about an hour and a half, and she said, if the assumption is true, the science works. I just don't believe the assumption is true. She didn't believe that there was water under the oceans. And it's like, well, why not? There's water under the oceans today. You know, you got these black smokers, some as hot as 867 degrees Fahrenheit, and they were discovered in 1977. Job wrote about them thousands of years earlier. Hast thou entered into the depths of the sea? So God's way ahead of science. And now with this theory, you know, what science, it's like we know what the effect is. That's known. We're trying to figure out how it got there, and the cause is unknown. Where this is backwards. He sets up the cause with one assumption. Just one assumption, and then lets the laws of physics go at it, and then you've got, and it fits the effects perfectly. So what's the one assumption? The one assumption is that half of the ocean was inside the Earth, roughly 60 miles deep. So just think of the Earth as a big apple. The crust is 60 miles thick, and that's being debated even among hydroplate proponents. And some people think it's too thick, and I agree. I think it's maybe 30 to 60. So we'll just go with Walt. He says 60. We'll say up to 60 miles thick. It could be less than that. That's the skin of the apple, and under that there's the water. And he says a mile thick. And I think this is probably more than a mile thick, depending on all this stuff that the water had to do. And then there's the mantle. So that's the one assumption. And then you throw in the laws of physics, and what would that be? That would be the moon. The moon tugs on the Earth. The moon's gravity tugs and makes high tide and low tide twice a day. And so it's going to tug on the crust of the Earth. And back then, the crust wasn't broken into plates like it is today. It was just the crust. So it'd stretch and compress twice a day. And that was generating heat. Like if I had a wire up here and I bend it back and forth, that's going to generate heat. And that's what's happening with the crust. The water gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It wants to boil, but it can't because there's no room to expand. And so at 705 degrees and 3,200 pounds per square inch, it becomes supercritical water, where it's not really water and it's not really steam. And this exists. This is from Walt's book. It says down at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean is the hottest water on Earth in a supercritical state, never seen before in nature. Supercritical, and this is from the New Scientist in 2009. And it also goes on to say that supercritical water is seen jetting up from the floor of the Gulf of Mexico. So there is supercritical water inside the Earth, and this, I think, is how it got there. So it's not really water, and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So it's dissolving the granite above and the mantle below, and it's mixing it together and making stuff like limestone and chalk and quartz and salts, and it just keeps regenerating that stuff. And when limestone is formed, it generates carbon dioxide. And Walt Brown he talks about this. For every carbon atom that precipitated in limestone, a carbon atom is released into carbon dioxide. And then that chart shows that the limestone, there's 60,000 times more limestone on the surface of the Earth than carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And Walt Brown, you know, he asked Bob Dietz, and that's the other thing. You know, I gave the 8th edition to a professor just a couple of years ago. Do you want to see a theory that works for Grand Canyon? She said, yeah. And then a day or two later, she said, well, I saw that Walt Brown's not a geologist. You can come and get your book. Yeah, he's not a geologist. But he took geology classes at Arizona State, and the guy who taught him was Bob Dietz, who's like one of the big hitters in plate tectonics. Bob Dietz is the guy who coined the term seafloor spreading. And so, and they were friends. They each had a competing flood model, but they would still meet every Wednesday for an hour or two and talk about things. And one time Walt asked Bob, he said, hey, where'd all the limestone come from? And Bob says, beats the blank out of me. And if you want to see more about that, Brian Nickel, he's got some really good videos. This one's answering problems with limestone formation. If you like diving in deep, he just does an excellent job on the origin of Grand Canyon, the origin of radioactivity, the origin of comets and asteroids. Just incredibly good done. And his Grand Canyon video is the most effective at showing what actually happens. Okay, and so this is the flood model. Hydroplate model. You got the rupture phase, that's when the fountains of the Great Deep break up. And then you got the flood phase, that's for 150 days, and the flood waters keep rising. And then you got the continental drift phase, that's about 1 day. When the continents slide together, and at the end of it, you got the compression phase where the mountains rise up in about an hour. You know, and then at the end there's the recovery phase. That's when the valleys were cut and also when, let's see, the plateaus were formed. So we'll touch on that. We'll show you how all this goes. Okay, let's go back to the supercritical water inside the Earth getting hotter and hotter, more and more pressure, dissolving the crust. The crust is getting weaker and weaker, and it's hotter and hotter, higher pressure. And Walt Brown says there was, 372,000 pounds per PSI in that water. And just think of that. going from 372,000 psi going up to atmospheric pressure of like 14.7. It's just going to be expanding like crazy coming up. It's just going to expand under that. Like if I had a water bottle here and it was under that much pressure, if I just cracked it, it would probably destroy this room. All that stuff gushing out of there very fast. So eventually the crust can't take it anymore, and it cracks. And that crack goes in two directions all the way around the world, and the water just explodes out of there. This is the fountains of the great deep. And the Bible talks about it, I believe. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up. Genesis 7:11. And that crack went around the world in two directions and came back together. And that's how it could rain for 40 days and 40 nights. And then the water still continued to go up until the 150th day. I think that's when the fountains were covered with too much water. It couldn't rain anymore. And people say, well, if that happened, Brian, wouldn't it leave a mark? And I said, yeah. It left the mid-oceanic ridge. That's a 46,000-mile mountain range that goes through the bottom of every ocean, and then it comes together on itself where that circle is. And that's where Walt Brown thinks that it ended. So he thinks it started up over by Alaska. Okay, so now we're going into the flood phase. All this water's coming up, and this is what's happening. During that, there's a lot of erosion taking place. You got two 60-mile cliffs that are crumbling into this high-pressure water. And on Earth, you can only have a cliff 5 miles high before it can't hold it underneath. And these are 60 miles high, so that's all crumbling in there. That's where we get the sedimentary rock. So the granite's eroding, the mantle's eroding, and that gets all. And then there's cementing agents inside that water, and that's how you get the sand to turn into sandstone. You know, you can have all the sand in the world; it's not going to turn into sandstone if it doesn't have a cementing agent. And it's also evenly mixed. You don't have hard spots and weak spots. It's also evenly mixed, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is Science Daily. Earth's crust missing in the mid-Atlantic. Why is it missing there? It's exposed to the mantle is exposed to the seafloor. Why is that? Was the crust never there? Was it once there but then torn away? If so, how and why? Okay, well that's the continental drift phase. They tell us that it's missing in the Atlantic. That's because it slid away. So as the cliffs were eroding, they're getting farther and farther and farther apart, and pretty soon there's nothing pushing down on the mantle. And the mantle bulges. And then the continents start sliding. Like if you had a train track and you lift up one end, the train's going to start rolling. And that's what's happening here. And Walt says, imagine how fast a skater or a hydroplate would slide down a mountainside the size of the mid-Atlantic ridge, whose surface was 50 times slicker than liquid water. 50 times slicker. That's going to start rolling. Just imagine an air hockey table. Put some water on there. It's not going to slide too well. But if you got some air pushing on that, and it's going to just go like there's no friction. And I think that's what's happening with the hydroplates. The plates were sliding on supercritical water, which is basically friction-free. And so they got some momentum going. And they kept on going until they met resistance, and then they buckled up. And that's what formed the mountains. The mountains rose up in about an hour, and that's why the mountains, the major ones, are pretty parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge. And Walt says that the continental drift phase ended with the compression event, the sudden crushing, buckling, and thickening of crashing hydroplates. Earth's mountains, such as the Andes, were pushed up in less than an hour. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine what that sounded like? Mountains forming. Well, I think that Psalm 104 gives us a hint. The waters stood above the mountains. Okay, the water is above the mountains. Not sloshing over the mountains. The water is above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the voice of thy thunder they hasted away. The voice of thy thunder. I'm thinking that's what the mountains sounded like as they formed, as they went up. And you look at the mid-Atlantic ridge, that rose up. Well, if something rises up, something has to sink in. Well, what sunk in? It was the Pacific Ocean. And that's why we got the Ring of Fire. There's a lot more volcanic activity, a lot more earthquakes there, and the Pacific Ocean is way different than the rest of the oceans. And that's why the trenches are there, most of them. The Mariana Trench is a mile deeper than Mount Everest is high. And how did that form? And you got all these sea mounts and table mounts, 40,000 of these things at the bottom of there. Some of those table mounts, those are volcanoes, the cones that got sheared off with the waves. And yeah, it's way different. And I think that's why. And it sunk in. What else sunk in? That's Zealandia in that square right there. That's the 8th continent. It's Zealandia, sunken 8th continent, reveals its buried secrets. And they found evidence of land-based fossils there. So at one time, that was above the surface. And it was about the size of India. And what I like about Walt Brown's book is that pretty much at the end of every chapter, there's a decision table where you got the theories on top and the features on the side, and then you red, green, and yellow. Or, red is it's not good at all. Green says, yeah, it explains it really well. And then yellow is maybe. And you look at the, trying to explain the trenches, earthquakes, and the ring of fire. And under the hydroplate, it's green all the way down, except for a few yellow, 1 yellow, 2 yellows. And if you look under plate tectonics, it's red all the way down, except for a couple of yellows. And I just am baffled why we aren't talking about this theory more. But this is a compression event. Those big plates are sliding friction-free, and they keep going until they run out of water, meet resistance, and then they buckle up. And that's incredible pressure, incredible friction, and that's going to melt some of that stuff and turn it into magma. And that's going to be how our coal and oil and marble and diamonds formed. They all needed heat and pressure to form, and this is what supplied it. And they find carbon-14 in all of those. They're not millions of years old. If you find carbon-14 in anything, it can't be more than 100,000 years old, because it's got a half-life of 5,730 years. So that millions of years propaganda is not true. And then this is the Gunnison Canyon. For scale, you look across the canyon, those trees on top are 15 feet tall. And look at that big canyon. And it's got crushed. Those are compression cracks. They got squished together, and as the pressure built up, they cracked, and the quartz inside melted. And you find this, I mean, what force could do that? What force could compress that much granite to make it crack? Well, I would say it's the plates that are sliding, and then one end stops, but the other end keeps going and crushes it. And you find the same stuff at the bottom of Grand Canyon. And Grand Canyon, and there's all these layers above it, all the layers that are just really sorted very purely. As the water's coming up, it's bringing all that sediment, the plates are kind of vibrating, and the waves are going across, so they call that, what do they call that? Liquefaction. And that's going to sort them into the different layers. Like if you had a bottle of dirt and mud and sand and stuff, and you shake it up, it's going to settle out based on its density, size, and shape. And that's what happened in those layers. And then the plate starts sliding, so the sediment's sliding on top of it, and then the basement rock buckles because there's so much compression, and then it rises up. But the sediments still keep sliding. So they keep sliding flat while the stuff on the sides were angled. And that's how you get flat layers on top of slanted layers in the Grand Canyon. That's how that got formed. And it's really neat. There's a quartzite block, I think that's sand under pressure, turns it into quartzite. And it got lifted up into this sedimentary rock. How do you explain that over millions of years? And that's right there, and it got formed down there, and it got lifted up. And those are Walt Brown's grandsons there. And I asked the leader of Canyon Ministries, they're a Christian organization. I asked him about this block. It's a 5 to 10 ton block, and it's at Isis Temple, and he knew about it. He said, but it takes a day or two of hiking to get there, so you really got to know what you're doing to get there. And that's, I didn't see this block when I was at Grand Canyon. That didn't show up on any of the placards. And then we come to the recovery phase. And this is when the water that was covering all the mountains, the whole earth, gush off the continents to fill in the Pacific Ocean. And that's why we have these submarine canyons at the mouth of most major rivers. These are canyons that are at the bottom of the ocean. You can't cut a canyon today at the bottom of the ocean. So that shows us that the continents were higher and the oceans were lower, and the water gushes off after the flood, cuts the canyons, and the continents sink down, and then the ocean rises up and buries it in water. And you see a big canyon in Greenland under 2 kilometers of ice. And how did that happen? The water gushed off the Greenland, cut the canyon, and then the Ice Age came and filled it up. And we aren't going to have time for the Ice Age tonight, but during Q&A or something you might. Okay, and then this, how do plateaus form? Okay, and a plateau that's got one vertical side to it, and typically it's next to the major mountain ranges. And how does that happen? Well, it's hydraulic lifting. Okay, the mountains are a big mass on a small base, so they sink in. And as they sink in, it squirts the magma to the side, and it builds up pressure on the side until there's a weakness, and a block shoots up. And then it keeps squishing water to the, or magma to the side until another block shoots up, and another block shoots up. And that's how you get the plateaus next to the mountains. The Colorado Plateau is roughly a mile high. The Tibetan Plateau, that's roughly 3 miles high. But that's how it all forms. So it's not a mystery. What's the mechanism? It's hydraulic lifting. And what's the force? It's gravity. And as it shoots out, some of this magma might squirt to the top. And then when it gets hard on top, then when a bunch of water comes by, which is the great denudation, you have to remove 2,000 cubic miles of sediment before you can start cutting the Grand Canyon. And so the water comes by, and it doesn't wash away the lava, but it washes away everything besides it. And so this is where you have Red Butte. And I saw that this year. That's 1,000 feet of Mesozoic sediment, which is really pretty soft and crumbly, capped with volcanic rock. And that's how that formed. And I got to see it. I took the picture as we're driving by. You know, you get flown into Phoenix. And if you ever want to see the Grand Canyon and have them do all the work for you and all the parking and all the driving, creationtoday.org has a great Grand Canyon trip, and also the Starting Point with Jay Siegert. I think that's what it is. And it's just beautiful. You fly in on Thursday, and you're on the rim on Friday, you're on the river on Saturday, and then you're either flying out on Sunday, or else you're still doing stuff with Jay's trip. But as you drive up from Phoenix, you're going to see Red Butte on the right, and you'll see something real similar, that Cedar Mountain. That's by Desert Views Tower in Grand Canyon. That's 900 feet of sediment. And that's all got washed away. And there's a tower there that has windows, and the window that you would see this had a blanket in front of it. I wish I would have took a picture. But yeah, that's a lot of fun. And this Monday I'm going to be debating somebody on Grand Canyon, the origin of Grand Canyon. That'll be 7 o'clock on the Standing for Truth YouTube channel. And I've got some questions for them. And they've got, 8 or 9 theories on how Grand Canyon was formed, and there's the features. And again, hydroplate theory is green all the way down, and everyone else is red or yellow, it seems. So we should be looking at this thing. And we don't have time for the Ice Age. Basically, but let's talk about the frozen mammoth. How do you freeze a mammoth standing up? Well, some of this stuff was shooting up with such tremendous force that it escaped our atmosphere and got super cold in outer space, and then came sloshing down on them and buried them in muddy hail. And again, there's the theories, there's the features, and again, Walt Brown's is green all the way down except for a few yellow. And why didn't they thaw out? That's why it didn't. The big roll, yeah, which you can see that on some of my other videos. I want to focus more on this one, on what we can do with this information, and look at the accurate predictions. Okay, and the inland seas, what caused these? That's the Mediterranean and the Gulf of Mexico and the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. What do they have in common? They all have a whole bunch of salt at the bottom of it. I think this is the salt that was formed in the subterranean chambers, and then it just blew out. Well, how would that happen? Well, chondrules give us a clue. Chondrules, what is that? These are things in outer space, or these are things in space, in meteorites. And you look it up in Britannica. Chondrules are small rounded particles embedded in mostly stony meteorites. Okay, and it's formed at high temperatures. And then they don't know how they melted, but they need high velocity collisions and quickly cooled. Okay, well, the hydroplate sounds like that. The supercritical was high temperature. That's where they formed. And as the water's going out of there, the plates are going to be kind of fluttering. They'll slam down until the pressure builds up, and then they'll come up, and they'll slam down and come up. But when they slam down, that's the high velocity collision, boom, that they talked about. And then it gets over to the side, and then pressure builds up and shoots them into outer space, where guess what? They cooled quickly. This is exactly how they formed. You get formed at high temperatures, high velocity collisions, cooled quickly. This thing explains it perfectly. And that's how you get and then how do you get the inland forms to see? When those plates are buckling, that's causing, Walt Brown thinks that's the origin of radioactivity. You got lightning going on in there, and that's going to have a lot of free neutrons there, make some weak points in the crust, and then the crust is going to explode. Boom. And some of this stuff got shot up during the Fountains of the Great Deep exploding. And some of it, not only did it escape our atmosphere, it escaped our gravitational pull. And that's where he thinks the comets came from, and the asteroids, and the trans-Neptune objects came from Earth. And when you look at all the theories and how they formed, again, he's got the strongest. And that's why he's able to make accurate predictions about what was in the comets. And I think we did a talk on that. Kevin Lee does an excellent job about NASA discoveries validating what the hydroplate theory would propose. And let's see here. And the near side of the moon is pounded, and the far side is peppered. Why is that? The near side should be protected by the Earth. You know, anything coming in from the Earth side or the top or the bottom, it's going to get sucked to the Earth because of the gravity. But yet that's where the major impacts are. You got more moonquakes, you got more lava flows on the near side. It's because it came from the Earth. And so then there's predictions. You know, what are the predictions of the hydroplate theory? And there's 58 of them. And in print, there's about 7 or 8 of them that are accurate. But Fred McNabb, he went through and he found 20 of them. And we don't have time to go through all of them, but the accurate ones are in blue. The other ones are just numbered. So we'll just take a look at what was accurately predicted. You know, superrotation in atmosphere of Venus. And that was predicted and it was validated. Salty water in very deep granite cracks was validated. Many fossilized whales at the base of the Andes. And you guys, this will be up on YouTube. You can take screenshots and look at his references. This is just, we're flying over the surface. Deep channels under Bosporus and Gibraltar. That was validated. Granite layer deep under the Pacific floor. That's, my guess is that would be Zealandia. And then fossils of land animals, not just shallow water plants, will lead to be found in near trenches. Oh yeah, it was. Shallow water fossils and in and near trenches. Trenches are way at the bottom. Okay, and the inner core's spin is decelerating. Apparently that's happening. And a unique chemistry of Grand Lake and Hopi basins. Those are 2 big lakes that are northwest of the Grand Canyon, and those were the lakes that drained to form the Grand Canyon. And if you want to learn more about that, that'll be Monday night when I debate the guy who's, I think, yeah, he's debating that there was a little bit of water over a lot of time to make Grand Canyon. And I'm saying, no, there was a lot of water over a little time to make Grand Canyon. So it'll be interesting during cross-examination. I get to ask him any question I want for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, and then he gets to do the same for me. That's the type of debate that I like. It's very fun. And then let's see, there's some more. I'll just leave this up for a little bit so you can screenshot those. Asteroids are flying rock piles. Pastor Kevin Lee, he pointed it out to NASA. He said, if you ever try to redirect an asteroid, it'll work if it's a solid rock. But if it's just a bunch of boulders, it's going to make it worse. And there's like 28 or 38 boulders that are flying around now because it wasn't solid like what they expected, but it was a bunch of boulders, which is what the hydroplate would predict. And rocks on asteroids and comets are rounded. You know, if something slams together in outer space, it's going to be jagged. How do you get a rounded boulder up there? Well, it's going through a fast flow of water, rounding off the sharp edges before it gets shot up there. And he predicted that. And they found it on Comet 67P, rounded boulders. They call them dinosaur eggs. And water inside of large asteroids. And Deimos has a very low density. And these are all accurately predicted. Planet X will not be found by January of 2021 in the next 5 years. So this was a long time, you know, and we still haven't got it in print, but hopefully they're going to make this available for December. It's possible to get this book. It won't be hardcover. I don't know if they're going to have it ready or not, probably not, but it's possible if they give it the okay, we can get those. It might be a proofreading copy, but I think that would be a good thing. Lineaments coordinate with earthquakes. Lineaments, those are straight cracks in the Earth's surface of the crust. Little radioactivity on Moon and Mars was validated. New telescopes will not find reionization of the intergalactic material, and I don't have a clue what that is, but apparently that happened. And carbon-14 in old bones, he predicted that, and it happened. And then comets formed will deliver lots of liquid water to Mars. And that's been validated. So there's about 20 of them. And let's see, what time do we got? I don't think we're going to show you this. You can see this on my YouTube channel, where Astro Alexandra really validates the hydroplate theory by talking about serpentine or serpentinite or serpentine that's only formed when water hits the mantle. And they find it up in asteroid Bennu. And it perfectly fits this. We'll skip it. Let's see. And this is what I really want to, and this is the drum I'm really focusing on. Dr. Thomas Chamberlain, over 100 years ago, he warned researchers not to let one hypothesis dominate their thinking. Instead, they should always have or seek multiple working hypotheses. And he said that'll sharpen our analytical skills, develop thoroughness, reduce biases, and you learn to discriminate and think independently. So otherwise, people just simply memorize and conform. And that's what's happening in our government schools. They're getting a blind chance perspective of the past, the Big Bang and evolution. That's all they're taught, so they don't think, they just memorize. But that's happening in our creation museums also when it comes to the flood models. They're just showing the catastrophic plate tectonics model. And so my challenge is, hey, which one's going to have the hydroplate theory in there first? Well, that's already been one. Broken Bow, Nebraska, they got the boneyards, they got the hydroplate in there. But now which theory is going to have both of them? Which museum is going to have both of them in there first? There should be a race for that. You know, have the catastrophic model, have the plate tectonics model, and I'm suggesting a hydroplate, the high wire protocol. Hydroplate protocol, it's like before you present your theory, if you're a Christian, show us the biblical support you got for that theory. And then show us the accurate predictions that you've had with that theory. And then show us the pending predictions that are yet to be proven right or wrong. And the high wire hits the ball out of the park on all of those. And I've asked big hitters in the creation movements, you know, what's your biblical support that distinguishes you from the other ones? And they just say Genesis 6, 7, and 8. And that's just the flood ones. That doesn't distinguish it. What are your accurate predictions? And they don't make predictions. And then I asked somebody else, and he hasn't responded. So we're trying to get these guys to step up to the plate. And all these unexpected mysteries and things for the secular models can be answered with the hydroplate. And why is there still resistance? I'll let you guys screenshot that on the video. But this is the scientific revolution. That's what I'm pushing for. Widespread belief systems seldom change when frequently reinforced by influential institutions such as universities, media, religious institutions, and the scientific and intellectual elite. That's where we're at, folks. The people with the power have the power. They don't want it to change because they got the books, they got the funding. They don't want anything to muddy that up. But when vast numbers of people realize they've been misled, an intellectual revolution begins. There's an avalanche of truth coming. And you can be early to the party or late to the party, but the party is coming. And it says, observers of this revolution should note which side avoids a rational scientific debate. That's right. You know, which ones are stepping up to the microphone? For months, we were trying to have the roundtable discussion with the CPT guys and the HPT guys and talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of each theory. They won't come up to the plate. So we did a hydroplate conference instead, a hydroplate seminar. But that's still out there. If there's anybody watching online, you're a catastrophic plate tectonic supporter, let's have a discussion. Let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of each side. And Real Science Radio, this website went down today. Hopefully it's up by now. But you can see those sources later. What I really want, if you want to download the 9th edition, go into hpt.rsr.org if it's up, and you'll be able to download it. And this is the 9th edition that was online from 2019 to 2025, and have that, because you never know if the internet's taken down. But what I really want to focus on is what can we do with this information? We have to start bringing it into the spotlight so people can have to think about it. And here's a famous creationist and a famous podcast, and I'm there in the chat. They're talking about the Bible should be the basis for everything. And I chatted, Christians have to stop trying to squeeze secular models into the Bible, like theistic evolution and catastrophic plate tectonics. And bingo, the Bible is the foundation. What do you think of the hydroplate theory, which has biblical support, makes accurate predictions, and is validated by NASA discoveries? And then the person who is running the chat, she says, hey, Brian, we aren't talking about the hydroplate theory today. If you have questions related to cultural apologetics, I'm sure they'd answer it. And I said, well, he was talking about the Bible being the basis for every topic. The hydroplate has more biblical support than CPT. Shouldn't we have all the information that is supported by the Bible? And then somebody asks, hey Brian, is HPT a AI chat platform opposed to ChatGPT? And I said, no, HPT is a flood model that logically explains 25 major features on Earth and in the solar system. It's made over a dozen astoundingly accurate predictions and is validated by NASA Discoveries. See Brian Nichols' YouTube channel. So right there, I planted a seed into somebody who can check out this theory. And then I said, would Ken lovingly accept Christians who support the biblical hydroplate theory? Yeah, would he? That's a good question. And said, can it be discussed without being blackballed? Because I know a creationist who doesn't even want to be seen on camera asking questions about the hydroplate because he's concerned that it might make waves. And I know a videographer, he won't make hydroplate videos because he makes videos for another organization. And he's afraid to lose all that business. So there's some gatekeepers that don't want this out. And so, yeah, we should be able to discuss that. And then it's getting towards the end, and I said, I agree, CPT is based, and then to his credit, he does address the hydroplate. He does, and I asked him if I could clip that and put it up on my YouTube channel so people can get all the information. You know, it's behind their paywall, so I wanted permission, but they never responded. So if you want to see how he responded to the plate tectonics or hydroplate, you can go into creationtoday.org and be a subscriber, and then you'll be able to look behind this paywall. And yeah. And it's, I said, I agree that CPT is based on a model, not scripture. HPT starts with the Bible and makes accurate predictions and is validated by NASA Discoveries. Shouldn't this be more openly discussed? Could you have both models in your museum so we can get all the information and make our own conclusions? And I said the HPT will destroy the Big Bang when it gets into the mainstream. It has much more biblical support than CPT. Destroying the godless theory of the Big Bang is something we can do. Would you help the strengths and weaknesses of each theory be discussed so science can advance? Right now we're in the dark ages, folks, in the government schools for sure. All you can think is blind chance, random collisions of atoms, Big Bang, evolution. They won't let you think outside that box. And again, the answer is outside the box. We were created. And so we're looking who's going to lead us out of the dark ages. And when it comes to flood models, we're in the dark ages too in the creation organizations. They only allow you to think about the catastrophic plate tectonic one. And so we need to start asking questions and more people asking questions. And I was at I heard a Randy Galuza, highly respect him. Heard him speak, oh boy, I don't have time for this. I don't, but anyhow, maybe during Q&A. What else here? Let's see. Thank you for your insights on HPT. I do appreciate it not being swept under the rug. Can we compare the accurate predictions of each theory and let the truth prevail? That's what I'm trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. What would be wrong with having both flood models in your museums? That would help people think critically instead of memorizing what is presented. And that's my big thing. I want people to think. And here's some, Brian Nichols got a good YouTube channel. You're going to go Christmas shopping, check out rsr.org or hydroplate.org. Those are some good websites. Again, we got the week of celebration on December 1st to the 6th. We got the Grand Canyon debate on Monday. And I want to destroy the icons of evolution one at a time. And Grand Canyon's one that is very, very flimsy, and as is most of them. And those are some good websites. Brian Nichols, Solidify Your Faith, and this is the schedule. So anyhow, with that, we are done. Let's see. So thank you so much for participating. This was a lot of fun.